Dad Guy here. You ever notice how some stories don't stay put? You hear them once, think they're just old campfire tales, but they stick around. They move. They find you again years later when the leaves start to turn and the nights get longer. Tonight's story comes from a place where old ghosts still walk, the Hudson Valley, just outside Sleepy Hollow. You've heard of Ichabod Crane, the horseman, the bridge, but this isn't his story. This is what happens when you go looking for the legend, and the legend decides it's been waiting on you all along. So pour yourself something warm, or strong, or both, and settle in, because this one's called Ashes over Tarrytown. And trust me, you'll want to keep the windows closed after sundown. October in the Hudson Valley doesn't look real when you first drive through it. The trees along the hillsides burn with orange, red, and gold, like somebody split paint along the ridges. The air has that crisp, dry bite that smells faintly of wood smoke and damp leaves. The kind of scent that makes you roll the windows down, even if the heater's running full blast. Tom, behind the wheel of the Subaru, had been narrating his own leaf peeping tour for the last hour, much to the irritation of his wife, Dana, and the rolling eyes of their teenage son, Nate. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tom said, tapping the steering wheel with mock importance. "To your left, the Hudson River, home to commerce, history, and more Revolutionary War ghosts than you can shake a tricorn hat at. To your right, the mighty blaze of nature herself. Truly, I deliver the best seasonal tours money can't buy." Dana didn't even glance up from her phone. "You missed the turn back there, tour guide." "I did not," Tom said, indignant. "The GPS just hasn't caught up with my superior road instincts." "Dad, you literally just passed the sign that said Tarrytown, next right." Nate's voice came from the back, muffled by earbuds. Tom grumbled and guided the car down the winding exit, muttering about signs being too small and technology overrated, until Dana laughed, which softened the edge of his irritation. Their trip wasn't supposed to be anything fancy, just a long weekend away from their suburban routine. Dana found a quaint bed and breakfast online that promised colonial charm and authentic local folklore, which, in Tom's mind, translated to creaky stairs, lumpy mattresses, and some poor guy in a tri-corner hat telling ghost stories for tips. But Dana had been insistent, and even Nate had agreed after some initial sulking. Something about Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow drew people in, especially in October, when the leaves were aflame and the shadows seemed longer. The inn sat at the edge of town, just before the road bent toward the hollow itself. The sign read, "The Hollow Hearth," painted in weathered black letters across a swinging board. A carved horse's head hung above it, worn down by rain and time until it looked almost skeletal. Tom pulled into the gravel lot, which crunched like bones beneath the tires. "Charming," Dana said, peering up at the white clapboard building. It was tall and narrow, the kind of place that seemed to lean a little closer to the road than it should. The shutters sagged slightly, and the porch posts were wrapped in dried corn stalks tied with twine. Pumpkins sat on each step, all carved with faces that weren't quite friendly. A woman in her 70s stepped out onto the porch as they unpacked, moving with a spryness that belied her age. Her silver hair was braided back, and she wore a long cardigan that brushed her calves. She waved with a kind of enthusiasm that made Tom briefly wonder if she'd been watching them from the window. "You must be the Kavanaghs," she called, her voice sharp but cheerful. "We've been expecting you." Dana smiled, clutching her overnight bag a little tighter. Yes, we booked under Dana Kavanaugh. This is my husband, Tom, and our son, Nate. The woman's eyes lingered on Nate for a beat too long, then flicked back to Dana. I'm Martha. My husband, Elias, is inside. He'll help with your bags. Nate leaned close to Tom, whispering, She looks like she'd poison an apple if you gave her half a chance. Tom smirked, whispering back, Better keep your wits about you, kid. This is Headless Horseman country. People play for keeps. Inside, the smell of cinnamon, beeswax, and something faintly smoky like a hearth that hadn't been cleaned properly. The walls were covered in framed sketches of the hollow, crooked bridges, leafless trees, and dark riders on dark horses. The fireplace crackled low, though the fire didn't seem to give off much heat. Elias, Martha's husband, emerged from a side room carrying a stack of wood. He was tall and stooped, with a head of wild white hair that looked like it might ignite if he got too close to the flames. His handshake was rough, his palms like sandpaper. Sleepy Hollow's finest, he said, his voice gravely. The house creaks at night, but don't mind that. Old bones complain when the cold sets in. Dana gave a polite laugh. Nate stared at him as if Elias had just confessed to burying bodies in the basement. Martha led them up the narrow staircase, her voice trailing back as she explained the history of the place. Built before the Revolution, once an inn for soldiers, then a tavern, then nearly abandoned before she and Elias restored it. She stopped at a door with a brass knob worn smooth. Here's your room, she said. Be sure to keep the windows closed after sundown. The winds through the hollow, they carry more than leaves. It was said like a casual warning, as if she were telling them to lock up to keep the raccoons out. But her eyes lingered again, dark and unreadable. Nate mouthed to his dad, Did she just say ghost, or am I hallucinating? Tom smiled, though his own chest tightened in a way he didn't like. By late afternoon, the light was already thinning, slanting golden through the trees. The town seemed to change with it. Shadows lengthened across the cobblestones, and even the cheery shop windows seemed dimmer, their reflections stretched thin on the glass. The cheerful bustle of daytime tourism gave way to something quieter, more watchful. Dana had signed them up for the lantern tour, insisting it would be authentic. Tom suspected it would be some kid in a cape telling spooky stories while tourists tried to take pictures for Instagram. Still, when dusk settled and the guide appeared, holding a wrought iron lantern with a flickering flame, Tom felt an involuntary chill crawl up his neck. The guide was a woman in her 40s, with sharp cheekbones and a voice made for storytelling. She wore a dark cloak that brushed the ground and moved like smoke when she walked. Her lantern light cast long, exaggerated shadows as she led the group of a dozen people into the old graveyard. Welcome to the Hollow, she began, her voice rich and unhurried, where stories linger like mist and the dead walk closer to us than they do in most places. Dana leaned into Tom and whispered, See? Authentic. Tom whispered back, If she pulls out a guitar and sings Kumbaya, I'm demanding a refund. Nate smirked, but the humor drained from his face as the guide's lantern swung past the leaning headstones. The shadows stretched, bent, and seemed to crawl a little longer than they should have. The guide spun the familiar tale of Ichabod Crane, gangly schoolteacher, enamored of Katrina Van Tassel, humiliated by Brom Bones, and pursued by the dreaded Headless Horseman. Her voice dipped low when she spoke of the Hessian soldier, decapitated by a cannonball during the Revolution. Since that day, she said, His ghost has been doomed to ride the hollow at night, searching for what was taken. A nervous laugh bubbled up from someone in the group. The guide didn't smile. She let the silence hang heavy. Then, almost too softly to hear, "But there are older stories still, stories Ichabod never heard, tales of riders before Hessians, before wars. This land was already haunted. The horseman was just the latest face it wore." Tom raised his brows. "Okay, that's new." He glanced at Dana, but she was staring intently at the guide. Even Nate had pulled out the one earbud to listen. The group followed her down the crooked path toward the old bridge, lanterns bobbing like will-o-wisps in the mist. The guide's voice carried through the hush. "They say the Hollow keeps a bargain. It gives the town prosperity, safety, harvests, but it takes in return. Always at night, always along the road. The rider is not a ghost. He is a collector." As if on cue, the air shifted, cold, sudden, sharp. The lantern flames guttered, and several people gasped. Tom felt Dana's hand clasp his arm. Nate muttered, "That's not part of the tour, right?" The guide only faintly smiled, though her voice was tight when she said, "Don't stray from the lanterns. Whatever you hear, don't step off the road." The rest of the walk blurred with tension. Hoofbeats echoed once, distant but heavy, like something large moving just out of sight. When Tom whipped his head around, there was only fog curling through the trees. A woman in the group whispered a prayer. By the time they returned to the churchyard gates, everyone was silent, unsettled. The guide bowed, thanked them for their time, and handed out pamphlets about other historic tours. But her eyes, when they landed on Tom's family, were sharp, lingering. "Stay close to the inn," she said. "The Hollow is restless this season." Then she blew out her lantern, plunging them into the chill dark. Back at the Hollow hearth, the inn's common room glowed with lamplight and the faint crackle of a low fire. Martha had left out a tray of mulled cider and a plate of ginger cookies that smelled like cloves and smoke. It should have been comforting, something out of a holiday postcard, but the mood at the little table was far from cozy. Nate stirred his cider without drinking it. "That tour guide was laying it on thick," he muttered. "The whole collector thing, that's not even part of the legend. She's making it up for drama." Dana said nothing. She was staring at the fire, brow furrowed, as if replaying the hoofbeats they'd heard on the path. Tom tried to shake off the feeling, to puncture the silence with his usual humor. "Come on, Nate. Every small town has its way of milking folklore. You think Roswell doesn't sell alien t-shirts at $5 a pop? It's tourism. People love being spooked." Nate looked up, his eyes shadowed in the firelight, then explained why the guy didn't laugh once. Not once. Even when that drunk guy in the group asked if the horseman rides Uber. Tom opened his mouth for a quip, then closed it. He noticed it too. The guide's face hadn't cracked, not even when people tried to lighten the tension. She wasn't telling a campfire story. She'd been warning them. Martha drifted into the room, carrying a small brass oil lamp. She set it on the mantel and adjusted the wick until the flames steadied. "Best to keep extra light burning tonight," she said, matter of fact, as though she were discussing the weather. Dana finally spoke. "Why?" "Because shadows stretch," Martha said simply, and then walked out. her cardigan sweeping behind her like a train. The three of them sat frozen. Even Tom had no words this time. When they retired to their room, the unease followed. The bed was soft, but felt unwelcoming, as though someone had lain there before them and hadn't truly left. Nate claimed the cot near the window, joking half heartedly that he wanted front row seats for when the horseman gallops by. But as the night deepened, the joke curdled. The wind rattled the shutters. Leaves scraped against the glass like fingernails. Somewhere outside, a horse snorted, sharp and close. Dana sat up in bed, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" Tom listened. At first, nothing, just wind and the groan of the house. Then it came again. Clop, clop, clop. Slow hoofbeats on gravel. He slipped from bed, crossed to the window, and peeled back the curtains. The lot below was empty, fog curling over the gravel like breath. But the sound continued, steady, measured. Hoofs on earth where no horse was visible. Nate whispered from the cot, "It's right under us." The sound grew louder, circling the inn. Not hurried, not random. A deliberate loop, as if whatever made it was tracing the perimeter, claiming it. Dana gripped Tom's arm. "Close the curtain." He did, but the sound stayed, working its way into his bones until it felt like the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Clop, clop, clop. Then silence. For a long time, none of them moved, barely even breathed. When sleep finally came, it was thin and jagged, laced with restless dreams. Tom woke once in the dark to find Nate standing at the window, curtain pulled back. "What are you doing?" Tom whispered harshly. Nate didn't answer. His face was pale, his eyes fixed outside. After a beat, he whispered back, "He's waiting on the road." Tom crossed the room, yanked the curtain closed, and guided his son back to bed. But when he lay down again, he couldn't shake the image. The fog outside, the old road cutting through it, and the sense of something large and patient just beyond sight. Nate was gone when Tom woke up. The cot by the window was empty, the blanket crumpled on the floor. For one sickening moment, Tom thought his son might be in the bathroom. But the door was ajar, the light off. Dana stirred, her hand reaching instinctively to the empty cot. "Where's Nate?" Tom's heart was already pounding. He moved to the window, yanked the curtains back. The glass was slick with condensation, but through the fog, he could see the faint outline of footprints in the gravel, fresh, leading away from the inn toward the road. "Oh God," Dana whispered, now fully awake. "Tom?" He was already pulling on his boots. They didn't stop to think, not really. Parental panic overrode reason. They threw on coats and hurried down the creaking stairs, the whole house groaning around them like it knew something they didn't. Elias was dozing in a chair by the fire. He opened one eye as they passed. "Not the road," he rasped, but his voice was too weak, and they were already out the door. The night air hit them like a damp shroud. Fog coiled thick around the trees, muffling sound, swallowing their breath. Tom's flashlight beam cut a narrow tunnel through the mist, and there just ahead was Nate's silhouette. He was standing in the middle of the road, pajama-clad, barefoot, his arms slack at his sides. His head tilted like he was listening to something only he could hear. "Nate," Tom called, his voice cracking the silence. Nate didn't turn. Then Tom heard it. Clop, clop, clop. The hoofbeats rolled through the fog, slow, deliberate, and drawing closer. The air thickened with the smell of damp earth and something metallic, like rust. Dana grabbed Tom's arm, her nails digging in. The shape emerged first as shadow, then as bulk, a massive horse, its coat black and slick, eyes burning like coals, and on its back, a rider, headless, cloaked, shoulders hunched forward as though straining under a weight. One hand gripped the reins, the other held nothing, an emptiness that was somehow worse than a weapon. The horseman stopped 10 yards from Nate. The horse's breath came in plumes, curling white into the fog. Nate's body swayed slightly, as though caught in an invisible tide. Tom lunged forward, Dana on his heels. "Nate, get back!" But as he reached for his son, the horseman's hand shot out, long, gloved, fingers curled like talons. It didn't touch Nate. It hovered just above his shoulder, holding him still as if caught in a magnetic pull. Nate's eyes fluttered, his lips parting in a whisper Tom couldn't hear. Tom's stomach lurched. This wasn't just a ghost story. It was possession by folklore. The hollow was taking its due. "Let him go," Tom roared, uselessly, his voice breaking against the fog. The horseman's hand twitched. The horse pawed at the earth, striking sparks from the stones. For a heartbeat, Tom thought the rider would swing Nate onto the saddle and vanished into the mist forever. Then Dana did something Tom would never forget. She stepped forward, clutching the iron lantern Martha had insisted they carry when they left. She lifted it high and shouted, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You can't have him! Not ours! Not tonight!" The flame inside the lantern flared, not yellow, but white, brilliant and searing. The horseman reared back, the horse screaming, the sound splitting the fog like torn metal. The rider's empty hand recoiled, curling into a fist of nothingness. For the first time, the story faltered. Tom seized Nate, yanking him backward. The boy stumbled, dazed, whispering. He said the hollow remembers, before collapsing into his father's arms. The horseman's mount struck the ground again, hard, shaking the road. Then, as if the fog itself swallowed him whole, the figure dissolved. Smoke, shadow, and the echo of hoofbeats fading into silence. The family stood panting in the road, the lantern's flame sputtering back to a weak yellow glow. The mist pressed in again, heavy and suffocating, but the rider was gone. For now. Tom scooped Nate into his arms. Dana held the lantern aloft with trembling hands. Together they staggered back toward the inn, each step heavier than the last. At the door, Elias was waiting, eyes hollow. He didn't ask what had happened. He only pressed a blackened horseshoe into Tom's hand. "For the road," he said softly. "It always comes back." Nate didn't wake until morning. When he finally stirred, the light of day was already slanting through the curtains. Dana sat at the edge of the bed, pale from a sleepless night, while Tom stood guard at the window, as if the fog might come pouring back through the glass at any moment. Nate blinked up at them, his voice faint. "Did we make it back?" Dana smoothed his hair back, her smile trembling. "We're here. You're safe." But when Tom pulled back the collar of his son's pajama shirt, his breath caught. A mark spread across Nate's shoulder, dark, almost like a burn, in the shape of a hand. 5 fingers, long and thin, pressed into the skin as if something had seared him in the night. Dana gasped, clasping a hand over her mouth. Oh, God! Nate tried to sit up, grimacing as though the mark ached. He touched me, he said quietly. I don't remember much, but he said the road doesn't forget. Tom felt his chest tighten. He wanted to tell his son it was just a nightmare, that the fog and fear had played tricks, but the mark pulsed faintly, like embers under the skin. There was no denying it. Elias appeared in the doorway, leaning on the frame. He didn't look surprised. You're marked, he said matter of fact. That means the Hollow's got its eye on you now. Dana rose, furious. What does that even mean? He's a boy. You let us stay here knowing this place isn't safe? Martha appeared behind Elias, setting a steaming cup of tea on the dresser. No place is safe, she said softly. But here, at least, you know what hunts you. Out there, she gestured vaguely to the world beyond the walls. Out there, it wears different faces. Nate shivered, clutching the blanket tighter. I don't want to stay here. You won't, Elias said. But when you leave, you'll take it with you. The words landed like a hammer. Tom wanted to argue, to demand answers, but Elias had already turned away, his footsteps retreating down the hall. They left the inn before noon. The Subaru packed in tense silence. Martha pressed something into Dana's hand as they loaded the last bag. A pouch of iron nails tied with twine. Keep them above your door, she instructed. It won't stop him, but it might slow him down. As they pulled onto the old road, Tom glanced in the rearview mirror. Martha stood on the porch, watching, her braids silver in the daylight. Elias lingered in the doorway, a shadow against the dim hall behind him. The town looked normal again. Tourists bustled through shops, children licked caramel apples, and scarecrows leaned cheerfully on every lamppost. But when they passed the cemetery, Nate stiffened, his eyes locked on the trees beyond the headstones. Dad, he whispered, don't speed up, don't slow down, just keep driving. Tom did as he was told, his grip white on the wheel. And there, on the ridge above the road, the fog thinned just enough for him to see it. A massive horse, black against the sky, a rider cloaked in shadow, headless, motionless, watching. The figure didn't move. It didn't need to. The mark on Nate's shoulder was reminder enough. They drove on, the image shrinking in the mirror, until the fog swallowed it whole. But even as the sun climbed, and the road unspooled before them, Tom knew the truth. They hadn't escaped. They had only been spared for now. The Hollow never let go. The drive south felt endless. Every curve of the road seemed haunted by the echo of hoofbeats. Every patch of fog a veil hiding what might be watching. By the time they reached the interstate, the family had lapsed into silence. No one wanted to speak the truth aloud, that some part of them was still on the road. They reached home by evening. The familiar sight of their suburban cul-de-sac should have been comforting. Lawns neatly trimmed, porch lights glowing, kids' bikes lying in driveways. But when Tom killed the engine, the quiet that fell around the car was too heavy, too still. Nate stirred in the back seat, rubbing his shoulder. The mark had darkened during the trip, bruised purple around the edges. When Tom tried to brush it off as nothing more than irritation, Nate's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. And for a flicker of a moment, Tom swore he saw something else staring back, something older. That night, after Dana tucked Nate into bed, Tom set about hammering Martha's iron nails above the front and back doors. He worked in silence, each strike of the hammer echoing through the house like a warning bell. Dana watched the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed, her face pale. "Do you think it'll help?" she asked. "No," Tom admitted, "but I need to try." Sleep didn't come easy. Sometime past midnight, Tom rose for a glass of water. As he passed Nate's room, he froze. The boy was sitting upright, wide awake, staring out the window. "Nate," Tom whispered, "what are you doing?" His son didn't look at him. His voice was calm, almost dreamy. "He followed us." Tom's throat tightened. He stepped closer, his eyes drawn unwillingly to the window. The street outside was empty, bathed in the yellow glow of street lamp. Nothing moved, nothing stirred, but the air was wrong, thick, pressing like fog without the fog. Nate's voice dropped lower. He said the road doesn't end, it just waits. Tom pulled the curtain shut, trying not to shake. He tucked Nate back into bed, murmuring reassurances neither of them believed. Then he returned to his own room, where Dana lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The three of them listened to the silence together, each pretending not to hear what they all heard faintly beneath it. Clop, clop, clop. So slow, so patient. By morning, the sound was gone, but the fear wasn't. Tom made coffee, stronger than usual, and tried to play the part of the rational man. Bills to pay, work emails waiting, life resuming, normalcy. But when he caught his reflection in the kitchen window, something inside him faltered. Behind him, faint in the glass, was the shape of a horse. He turned. Nothing there. But the mark on Nate's shoulder burned darker that day. And in his own chest, Tom felt it. The certainty that no distance, no daylight, no suburban comfort would matter. The hollow had found them. And it wasn't finished. And that was Ashes Over Tarrytown. One of those stories that reminds you some roads don't ever really end. You just wait until you find your way back to them. If you're new around here, I'm Old Dad Guy, your guide to the strange, the haunted, and the occasionally ridiculous. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next ride into the dark. And if you enjoyed tonight's story, leave a comment below. Tell me what you think the Hollow really wants. Until next time, keep your lanterns lit, your doors locked, and your sense of humor sharp. Because in the end, every town's got its ghosts. What kind of boats do vampires travel in? Blood vessels. Meh. Old Dad Guy. You thought you were alone, didn't you? But they've been watching the whole time. Like, subscribe, and maybe they'll let you sleep tonight.